I'd like to call this joint meeting of the House and Senate Veterans Affairs Committee together and welcome everyone from the VFW, the auxiliary, the friends, the wives, and loved ones for coming to Washington, D.C. And let me begin where we always end. Thank you for your service to our country. We wouldn't be here today were it not for you, and we realize that every single day. So God bless all of you for being here, and thank you for your service. I'm Johnny Isakson, Chairman of the Senate Veterans Affairs Committee, and I'll make my opening remarks and then turn it over to the Chairman of the House Committee and then the two ranking members. We are taking on reforming the VA seriously as a committee, and we are doing it jointly, Republicans and Democrats, because there are no Republicans and there are no Democrats on the battlefield, only Americans. We want to make sure we have a bipartisan approach to solve the problems that the VA has and make it an even better organization now today than it has been in the past, and we are committed to doing exactly that. We want to see to it that our growing number of women veterans who come home have the services in the VA that they need to meet the needs of our women veterans, and I know VFW focuses an awful lot on that. We're working hard to see to it that the VA is accountable for the actions they take in terms of the quality and the amount of health care and the availability of health care to our veterans. VA has no higher calling than to be 100% accountable to the veterans who have earned and deserve their services. We want to see to it that the Veterans Administration is responsive. We want to see to it we break the 440,000 backlog of appeals on determinations in the VA. That is an inexcusable number that can be shortened, can be lessened, and we're committed to trying to do it. All in all, we're here to solve the problems of the veterans of America who've made us free in a democratic society that we are today. We're honored to work for you and work on behalf of you, and we're honored to have you here today. I'll now introduce Chairman Miller from the House Veterans Affairs Committee.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. It's a pleasure to be here with you again today, to Commander Bajetsky and the VFW members that are here today. Thank you for making the journey to Washington, D.C. It's always an honor to have an opportunity to sit on this dais with Chairman Isakson and Ranking Members Blumenthal and Brown in a bipartisan fashion to do what this Congress is supposed to do, and that's provide oversight and get some things done. We thank you again for making the trip, and I will ask first, but I promise you, watch this. When Ms. Brown comes in, she'll ask the same thing. All those that are here from Florida, if you would, stand or raise your hand so we can recognize you. Thank you very much. Great to see you. You know, your military service, Commander, is unquestioned. I know that we're going to have a great introduction from my former colleague and now Senator Toomey today. You couldn't have a better person coming to introduce you today, and I want to thank you again for what you've done and for what you do. And I've had the opportunity to meet with some of you, and I'm going to be meeting tonight with a lot of you, and I just want to say, before I ask that my entire statement be entered into the record.
Without objection.
Thank you for the honor, and I look forward to seeing you tonight at your reception. Thank you for your support of many of the legislative priorities that the House and the Senate have put forth in trying to get the VA to be held accountable and to be transparent in what they do. And with that, I yield back.
Thank you very much, Chairman Miller. Ranking Member Blumenthal from Connecticut.
Thank you. I'm Richard Blumenthal from Connecticut. Everybody from Connecticut, please raise your hand or stand. There you are. I don't know whether Bob Bailey was able to make it, but thank you for your leadership as Chief of the VFW in Connecticut. And thank you all, Commander and your team, for being here today. The VFW is always welcome here because you bring an insight and a commitment that is unexcelled in America today, a commitment and a dedication to our veterans and an insight into what their issues and challenges are. And I want to thank you in your testimony, Commander, in advance for highlighting 3 issues that I think are supremely important: the overhaul and sustainment of care in the community. There are financial challenges and quality challenges that we have to overcome, expediting what is undeniably unreasonable, unconscionable delay in processing appeals. There are 440,000 now pending. The burden on veterans, real life burdens, is undeniable. And finally, carrying out the cultural change in the department that is necessary to restore trust and credibility Ron Neighbors referred to the corrosive culture at the VA that led to personnel problems across the department. That's a fundamental issue that needs to be addressed. And in addition, I want to thank the VFW for focusing on post-traumatic stress, one of the most pernicious and insidious invisible wounds of war, still unaddressed widely across the country. And of course, the plight of women veterans whose needs and challenges still are underaddressed in our VA today. And I think that there needs to be greater emphasis on that aspect of our service to our veterans. So thank you for being here today. You know, one of the Supreme Court justices once said that the best sunlight is the best disinfectant. Sunlight shone on problems. That's what we need to do, and that's what you do by being here today. Thank you.
Ranking Member Corinne Brown from Florida.
Good morning. Before I begin, and I know Chairman Miller has already mentioned it, but the people from Florida, would you please, let's give them a hand. Thank you for being here. And as I was thinking about this meeting last night, I thought about another group, the Vietnam veterans. You know, we didn't adequately receive them when they came home. And with those veterans, either stand up or wave. Let's give them a hand. Thank you. Let's do it again. The Vietnam veterans. Stand up again. Thank you. Commander, and I'm going to be brief because I'm waiting for your remarks, but I want to thank you for being our partner and for your service in and out of the military. When I went about 2 or 3 weeks ago to a hearing, and the discussion was pertaining to suicides, and, you know, 22 a day, just totally unacceptable. But the problem is that only 3 of the 22 a day are a part of the VA, and many of them are from the Vietnam War era. We've got to reach out and get them in the system, not just to register, but get them as a part of the system. And we all got to soldier up. We got to reach out to those that are not a part of the system. And I am asking all of us to reach out to our friends that we know that are not a part of the VA. And that is one area that I want you to address. And another area, women. And I had a good meeting yesterday with the commander from Florida. Fastest growing group, making sure that we are addressing their needs, their unique needs, and that as we prepare for this new generation of women. So I want to thank you for being our partners. I am committed that 20 years from now, when we look at VA, that we will recognize the VA. I know we have partners, but it is making sure that we're doing all we can do to keep the commitments that we made to you when you joined. I know most people do not know, but 86% increase in discretionary funding for veterans from President Barack Obama. You will never see it on Fox News, but I'm giving you today. But we as members of Congress got to make sure that we spend it properly and we address the needs of the veterans. So with that, I want to thank you for your service, and we all need to soldier up. Thank you.
Chairman Miller.
And I want to thank the ranking member, Ms. Brown, for bringing forward the increases in the budget during the current administration. But I do want to bring up the fact that under the Bush administration, we increased the budget by 120%. There you go. There you go. Get you started.
Well, I'm going to add into this for just a little bit. I'm going to use chairman's privilege from the Senate. You know, one thing that's great, I said there are no Republicans and Democrats on the battlefield, only Americans. If you look at the budgets of the last 16 years since I've been up here, VA has consistently been funded at the level it needed to be. And when we got into a shutdown issue a few years ago, we forward-funded VA for 2 years to make sure there was never a break in veterans health care. We commit to you there will never be a break in veterans health care, and we will always meet the needs of our veterans because you met the needs we had when we called on you to fight for us. Thank you all. I had the privilege, before we called this meeting together, to meet with the leadership of the Georgia VFW representatives. I'd like for them to stand, and all the other members who are here from the great state of Georgia. It's now my privilege to introduce the VFW's Executive Director, Bob Wallace, for introductions to the head table with the exception of the commander.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members of the Senate and House Veterans Affairs Committee, I am honored to have the privilege of introducing the national officers of the VFW and our auxiliary. Mr. Chairman, please allow me to ask those to be introduced to please remain standing, and I wish to request the audience to hold its applause until all have been introduced. The National President of our auxiliary, Francisca Guilliford from Alaska. The National Auxiliary Secretary-Treasurer, Jan Owens from South Carolina. Commander-in-Chief's wife, Betty Jean Bajetsky from Pennsylvania. Senior Vice Commander-in-Chief's wife, Jean Duffy from Kentucky. Junior Vice Commander-in-Chief's wife, Mary Lou Harmon from Ohio. The National Officers of the Veterans of Foreign Wars. Senior Vice Commander-in-Chief Brian Duffy from Kentucky. Junior Vice Commander-in-Chief Keith Harmon from Ohio. Adjutant General John Hamilton from Florida. Quartermaster General Lawrence Maher from Missouri. Judge Advocate General Matthew Mahalik from Illinois. Surgeon General Dr. Curtis O. Bowman from Oklahoma. National Chaplain Joseph Geist from California. National Chief of Staff Alan Q. Jones from Pennsylvania. Assistant Quartermaster General Deborah Anderson from Missouri. Inspector General William Doc Schmidt from New York. Assistant Adjutant General Kevin Jones from Missouri. Chairman of the National Legislative Committee Al Buki from New Jersey. Director of the VFW National Legislative Service Raymond Kelly from Maryland. Director of VFW National Veterans Service Gerald Menard from Virginia. And I'd also like to recognize the presence of many of our past commanders and chiefs. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee.
To introduce Commander Bajetsky, who we're happy to have here today, the distinguished senator from the great state of Pennsylvania, Pat Toomey.
Thank you very much, Chairman Isaacson and Chairman Miller, ranking members Blumenthal and Brown, members of the committee. It's indeed an honor for me to be able to introduce the Veterans of Foreign Wars Commander-in-Chief, John Bajetsky. Now, Commander Bajetsky likes to be known around Pennsylvania as Big John, but I'm going to call him Commander Bajetsky because it reflects the appreciation and respect I have for his service to the country and his service to the VFW. Of course, he's a native of Pittsburgh, and I think it's entirely fitting that the VFW commander is a Pennsylvanian once again. Pennsylvania played a critical role in establishing the VFW. Post number 1 started in Philadelphia. The first official convention was in Pittsburgh in 1914. VFW held their 100th anniversary in Pittsburgh in September of 2014. And Pennsylvania has one of the largest VFW departments in the nation. Pennsylvania VFW has nearly 90,000 members, 400 local VFW posts. Commander Bajetsky was elected Commander-in-Chief of the VA in July 22, 2015, after serving in the Army in 1967 to 1970 in Korea, winning multiple awards and recognitions, including the National Defense Service Ribbon, the Good Conduct Medal, the Armed Forces Expeditionary Medal, the Korean Defense Medal. He's been a member of the VFW since 1969. He is a retired high school teacher and baseball coach at Langley High School in Pittsburgh and a life member of the Military Order of the Coati. Commander Bajetsky is active in the community in many other ways, on the board of directors of the Soldiers and Sailors Memorial Hall Museum in Pittsburgh, and an announcer of the Pittsburgh Veterans Day Parade for over 30 years. Over the years, I've had the pleasure of working with VFW rank-and-file members and leadership closely on a number of pieces of legislation that are very important to our veterans. I've had the honor to work with this committee as well on a number of important bipartisan bills, including my legislation, the Dignified Interment of Our Veterans Act, which would ensure that the unclaimed veterans' remains are properly honored, working with my colleagues, including Senators Heller and Casey, on the 21st Century Veterans Benefits Delivery Act, and of course, supporting the VA Choice and Accountability Act, which has increased veterans' choices for non-VA care. So, Mr. Chairman, I look forward to continuing my work with the VFW and with this committee. It's an honor, as I say, to introduce a great American, the VFW Commander-in-Chief, Big John Biedziecki, to the Joint Veterans Affairs Committee today. He's a great Pennsylvanian, a great American, and I thank you, Chairman Isakson, and members of the committee.
Well, thank you, Senator Toomey. Commander Biedziecki, we'll introduce you for 10 minutes, and by unanimous consent, your entire statement will be entered in the record.
Thank you
Welcome.
very
We're
much,
glad to have
Mr.
you,
Chairman. But before I begin, I'd like to take the liberty to announce to everyone that this evening, in this room, we will have a reception, and the Veterans of Foreign Wars will honor Chairman Miller with his National VFW Legislative Award this year for his fine work and support of our veterans. And attendance will be taken, so you're all cordially invited to be with us. Chairman Isakson and Miller, ranking members Blumenthal and Brown, and members of the Senate House Veterans Affairs Committee. It's my honor to represent the 1.7 million members of the Veterans of Foreign Wars of the United States and our auxiliaries. During my time as commander, I've traveled around the United States and multiple countries around the world, talking with veterans and active duty military personnel. I've seen firsthand the effects that medical appointment wait times, delays in compensation, and pension decisions, and concerns for military transition by our troops, veterans, and their families. The VFW is on Capitol Hill to bring a unified voice for these men and women, America's true heroes. This experience, along with thousands of responses to our survey and calls for assistance through our toll-free help hotline, gives me a clear understanding of what veterans around the country are experiencing and what their expectations for health care and benefits are. Because of this feedback, we understand what is working from the user's perspective and what needs to be improved. Today, I bring the VFW's recommendations on how to improve the delivery of health care and benefits to our veterans. We agree that Congress must take a comprehensive look at VHA to fix what is broken, and we will work with you to identify problems and make those needed changes. But let me be clear, the VFW is absolutely opposed to the privatization of the VA healthcare system. It cannot be replaced, and we will fight any efforts to do so. Moving forward, the VA needs a sufficient budget. The administration's request nearly matches the independent budget recommendations, except for construction. Funding for these accounts must be increased to finish current projects and to begin work on those facilities that pose safety threats to veterans, their families, and employees. Our latest choice survey indicates that nearly half of the veterans who believe they are eligible for the choice program have been given the opportunity to participate, and that is up 20% from the previous year. VA must continue to improve the program to ensure all veterans who are eligible for choice are offered the opportunity to use it. The majority of choice program complaints are scheduling community care appointments and veterans being improperly billed for care when the VA should pay the bill. Both are due to delays in the transfer of medical documentation and authorization for follow-up care. VA is working on several IT projects to address this concern, which the VFW supports. Congress must provide VA the necessary resources that they have requested. Congress must also act on VA's proposal to consolidate its community care programs. This consolidation is critical to the overall health, care, and delivery transformation. The VFW supports Secretary McDonald's My VA transformation, which encompasses numerous programs geared toward improving veteran and employee experiences, their training, support services, performance, and strategic partnerships. The VFW realizes this transformation will take time to implement, so we urge Congress to work with the VA on My VA initiative to ensure these programs succeed. Any plan to reform the culture of the VA must also take into consideration the need to modernize its workforce. VA must be able to recruit, train, retain, and properly pay high-quality healthcare professionals for our veterans. Changing the culture of the VA also means changing the culture of accountability. VA must have the proper authority to properly discipline employees whenever appropriate. Regarding health care, when and where veterans need to be seen must be a clinical decision made between a veteran and his or her doctor. This is why the VFW believes that VA must integrate the capabilities and strengths of all existing health care resources in local communities, to include public and private community providers. The VFW supports the VA's plan to develop a nationwide system to deliver urgent care. But these options cannot increase the cost of co-payments or fees. The last component in transforming VA healthcare delivery and capital infrastructure, the VA must be given the authority to enter into public-private partnerships and broader sharing agreements. In an ongoing effort to hear from our membership, the VFW conducted a survey to gauge on how well the VA is serving women veterans. The survey found Veterans Administration had made progress in addressing the unique needs of women veterans, but there's still room for improvement. I specifically note areas of healthcare, outreach, and homelessness. The most common suggestion we received was to expand the access of women's health care. Our survey also found that only 40% of women veterans were given the opportunity to choose the gender of their primary care provider. Women veterans overwhelmingly prefer to receive their health care from female providers. And those who receive care from a female provider have higher satisfaction rates than those who don't. VA must make every effort to hire more women healthcare professionals and expand women-specific programs to ensure all women veterans have access to women-specific primary care. Our survey also found that 45% of women veterans reported using VA mental health care services, and that they are concerned that gender-specific mental health care services are not always properly tailored to meet their needs. This must change. That is why the VFW urges VA to expand its designated women's health care program to include mental health. So when women veterans seek care, their providers understand their specific needs. We were also told that VA employees continue to confuse women veterans for spouses or caregivers, and sometimes they even challenge their veteran status. VA must properly train its workforce to treat women veterans with respect and the dignity that everyone deserves. Furthermore, our survey found a much lower utilization and awareness of benefits among older women veterans compared to their younger counterparts. The VFW recommends the VA conduct targeted outreach to older women veterans to ensure that they are aware of the benefits and services VA provides. Far too many survey respondents reported being homeless, a risk of becoming homeless, or living in another person's home. The VFW recommends expanding the opportunity to obtain assistance finding permanent housing. 38% of those who reported being homeless or at risk of being homeless also reported having children. Homeless veterans with children experience unique challenges when obtaining VA health care and other benefits and services, to include job training opportunities that will lift them from being homeless. We must find child care options for these veterans now. Each year, the VA provides a list of legislative priorities in its annual budget proposal to provide new or extended existing authorities. And most of these priorities make sense. Others, the VFW adamantly opposes. 5 of these proposals will dramatically change the appeals process and, at the same time, deny veterans their due process rights. The VFW supports efforts to make the appeals process more efficient and timely. But we will fight any proposal that denies veterans their rights. VA is asking that the record be closed after the initial decision is made, and that all appellate functions be moved to the Board of Veterans' Appeals, therefore removing every due process right that is currently provided at the regional office. Further, VA proposes eliminating the options for hearings at all levels. VA also wishes to redefine the terms reasons and base ease and prevailing party, effectively stripping veterans of quality decision letter and severely reducing their options for legal representation at the Veterans Court. The VFW supports the concept of a fully developed appeal initiative and appreciates the committee's bipartisan work on this issue. We remain concerned that decision notification letters currently contain inadequate information, preventing veterans from making educated decisions on whether to appeal their decision or not. This must be fixed. Veterans deserve to know whether their health conditions are associated to toxins and whether they were exposed in their military service. And when they are, there must be clinical understanding of these conditions so that proper treatment and compensation can be provided. That's why the VFW supports the inclusion of all Blue Water Navy ships for the purpose of Agent Orange presumption, researching all symptoms and conditions associated with Gulf War illness, expanding eligibility for Gulf War registry health exams to Afghanistan war veterans, properly researching and evaluating the health effects of burn pit exposure, passing the Fort McClellan Health Registry Act, and ending the inequity in presumptive conditions for Korean DMZ veterans. Ensure the list of presumptive dates for Camp Lejeune, making sure that it is comprehensive and complete, and to pass the Toxic Exposure Research Act for the dependents of veterans who are exposed by toxic materials. As the nation's oldest and largest organization of war veterans, the Veterans of Foreign Wars strongly supports the full expansion of caregiver benefits to all generations of warfighters and all service members, active, Guard, and Reserve, who serve in a combat zone and should receive the post-9/11 GI Bill at the 100% rate. In closing, I would be remiss if I didn't mention the sacred mission of recovering American POW MIAs. This mission is the highest priority for the VFW, and we call upon Congress to fully fund the Defense POW MIA Accounting Agency and its supporting organizations. Thank you again for this opportunity to represent the VFW today, and I look forward to any questions that you may have of us. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Commander Budjetsky, thank you very much for your comprehensive testimony, and I'm going to pull three parts out of it if I can and address them forthright and ask you to comment if you would. First of all, I heard loud and clear what you said on the appeals process and veterans' claims and their due process. But somewhere between where we are now and where we need to be, we're going to have to work together, the VFW and these committees, to find a solution to the never-ending appeals process to get the workload down and make sure the veterans represented, but there is some ability to eventually have closure. We currently have appeals that are 25 years old. Those appeals are taken away from veterans who have contemporary appeals. We don't want to cut people off, and I understand the fear of fully developed claims being cutting people off too early, but open ad infinitum is also keeping things open too late. So we're going to look forward to the VFW helping us to find the key to ensuring there's accountability in terms of the process for the veteran, but also having some degree of closure in the process. Will you help us with that?
I understand that, and I'm going to ask Mr. Walls to make a comment about that because we've spent a lot of time deeply considering those issues.
Mr. Chairman, yes, we have told Secretary McDonald and Deputy Secretary Gibson that we are all in as a partnership to fix the appeals process. But VA has to fix what they have screwed up themselves first. They took all the staff. They took all the staff from the regional office and put them on reaching 125 days, and they're 98% or whatever their goal was for accuracy. No appeals were worked during that time. Appeals are sitting in the regional office. The numbers are 300 or 1,000 or more. If they sent those to the board in a timely manner, the board then, the veteran then gets his statement of the case. 50% of the people historically don't even appeal after that because they understand what the decision was. That would cut the appeals down. If they had decision review officers in the regional offices, they would be able to do what they should be doing in the regional office. They have to be willing to change and go back to what they should be doing as we work together to make the future better.
I appreciate your input, and we look forward to working with you on improving that situation and not allowing the VA to make one change over here while we have a bigger response over here, which is exactly what happened on the claims and the
It was
appeals.
terrible management of their workload.
It was inappropriate manipulation at best. I want to thank you, Commander, for your talk about supporting us on accountability. I know the chairman and the ranking members and myself wake up every morning in fear of the next news story that's going to be on Fox or CNN about what happened at the VA. Most recently, we had a nurse intoxicated in a VA for a medical procedure. We have a lot of problems in the VA. We got a lot of great employees delivering a lot of great services, but we got a lot of problems. And the chairman of the House and myself and our ranking members believe it is time to have a meaningful accountability bill passed the Congress of the United States and give Secretary McDonald and any future secretary the ability to run the department in an accountable way to our veterans. We hope you'll support us in doing that because I intend in the Senate to see to it we bring that to a conclusion before the year is over, before June is over this year, to see to it we have better accountability within the Veterans Administration. Your help will be appreciated.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and we certainly would pursue that because quality of care is very important. And when there are mistakes made, they need to be addressed, and there has to be an accountability function and the ability to correct those problems in a timely fashion and reinstitute the proper care that's necessary. So we would support your initiative, sir.
On every battlefield every veteran ever fought on, there was no second chance to go back and do something over again. You were called upon it once and you had to execute. the VA needs to execute exactly the same way in providing its services to the veterans of the United States of America.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
And lastly, I wanted to comment and thank you for your recognition and the amount of time you dedicated, about 2.5 minutes in your remarks, to women veterans. We now are moving towards 13% of the veterans returning home will be women in the not-too-distant future. The Veterans Administration healthcare is now up to 10% of those they take care of are now veterans. It's past time that we made sure the VA health services delivered to women were appropriate and in keeping in both in equality and availability, accessibility, and type of care with that which males are doing. And I appreciate your advocacy on behalf of women. Do you know what percentage of the VFW membership is women, by the way?
It's actually more than the national average. In the military now, it's 15%, and I think it's close to 17% in the VFW. They're joining. We've quadrupled our membership of women veterans in the last 4 years.
No wonder you dedicated 2.5 minutes of your testimony.
I know where
why
my
you're the
bread is
commander.
buttered.
Yeah, so do we. So, thank you very much, Commander. Senator, Congressman Mill.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I would like to touch on some of the comments that you just made in regards to accountability, as well as the Commander and Mr. Wallace as well. It is so critical that we get this accountability piece right. The nurse that went into the operating room inebriated has admitted to the fact that they did. It's going to take 300 days to go through the process to discipline this particular individual through the VA. That just doesn't make sense. The other thing that doesn't make sense, Sharon Hellman, who was at the epicenter of the Phoenix wait time debacle, pled guilty yesterday to not for the wait time manipulation, but to accepting gifts while she was in fact employed by the department illegally. And she needs to be held accountable as well, but unfortunately there is no provision to go back in and claw back any bonus that she received, nor is there any ability to go back in and affect her pension, which very well could have been strengthened by some of the things that she did. And so we are working in a collaborative effort across the aisle, trying to find the sweet spot, if you will, to begin this accountability process at the department that holds those that won't do what's right for the people they're supposed to be serving. Thousands of individuals go to work every day at the VA for the right reason. But for those that won't, they need to go out the door. They need to be disciplined, and it needs to be stick and not be overturned by some unelected bureaucratic process. There's some differences between us politically as we go through this process, but we're working on it. I also want to say, Mr. Wallace, you talk about the backlog numbers that are out there. It's very interesting that when the department talks about the current backlog, they will talk about specific numbers when they say the backlog is down to 90,000 claims or whatever the number is. But when you talk about the appeal side of the equation, they stop talking about the actual numbers and they talk about a percentage. And they say the percentage has stayed constant. They need to either talk about percentages on one side as equal to the other side, but they're just not doing that. I want to talk a little bit about the choice program, Commander. We all want to see it be a success. But if you put all the money in the world behind it, if you hire all the physicians in the world to do it, all of the schedulers, if the people that are talking to the veteran don't understand how the program is supposed to work, it's going to fail. And so the question that I would have is, how can the department best be held again accountable for making sure that their employees know exactly how the choice program is supposed to function? It's not the department's responsibility to say, I'm providing you choice. It's the veteran's responsibility and decision as to whether or not they want to leave and go outside of the system. So could you help us understand a little bit better what the department can do to strengthen the choice program?
Well, I think any remedial action requires training on their part and information. it seems that when the program was rolled out, there was a lot of confusion among those who had to provide the care and also those who were put on the choice program. The biggest problem that has come is the records, is the medical records going back and forth, and third-party payment, where veterans are being billed for those services. And that's happening in a number of instances as I've traveled the country, veterans who complained vehemently about the collection agencies and being billed for services that the VA should pay for them immediately. In addition, Mr. Kelly, did you want to make a comment about that?
Yes, sir. Thank you, Commander. In the end, we need an integrated system. Right now, there's a barrier between VA and non-VA care. That barrier needs to come down. We need an integrated system. You don't call an engine if the parts are laying on the ground and not together. You only call it an engine when it's all put together. So we need to make sure that we take the best parts of what VA is doing in each community and what resources the community can bring to bear and find what the demand capacity is in each one of those places and determine what do we need to supplement through VA, what can the community provide, and have that integrated so those records don't get lost in a system, but VA can continue to have oversight of those veterans. We don't want veterans to be told they're going to go out in town, have a procedure done, and for 3 months, medical records are delayed coming back to VA, and they needed a follow-up appointment. We need to make sure that it's integrated. VA stays the guarantor of that care. So,
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Senator Blumenthal.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Commander, I want to thank you for focusing on the toxins and chemical contaminants that all too often cause illnesses among our veterans. They are unseen and unrecognized all too often. Thank you for focusing in particular on Korean veterans who have illnesses linked to Agent Orange. Eugene Clark of Connecticut, Reading, Connecticut, has been instrumental in bringing a light to shine on these problems, and I want to thank Carlos Fuentes of the VFW for championing this cause. I can pledge to you that we are going to fight as long and hard as possible to make sure that Korean War veterans are covered in compensation health care if they suffer from Agent Orange-linked illnesses. We're going to make sure that they are treated fairly. I also want to thank you for your focus on the Toxic Exposure Research Act of 2015. I've spearheaded this measure along with my colleague, Jerry Moran of Kansas. There is a lack of realization in the public today about how dangerous the modern battlefield is as a result of toxins, poisonous chemicals, other contaminants, whether it's from burn pits or continued presence of nerve gases or other kinds of poisons, literally poisons on the battlefield that may result from our own activities, the equivalent of friendly fire. And this Research Act, I think, will be important. Hopefully it will pass in making sure that we do the research, but also provide the benefits and compensation that our veterans need. So thank you for highlighting it. And I also want to talk about another invisible wound, post-traumatic stress. And here, I'd like your assessment of whether we are adequately addressing the health needs, mental health needs of our veterans who suffer from post-traumatic stress, including many of the veterans of past wars, Vietnam and Korea, who were discharged less than honorably, bad paper discharges. Representative Kaufman and I have focused on this issue, and I hope that together we can work on measures that will provide some fairer treatment before the discharge review boards. They deserve fair treatment and perhaps reversal of those less than honorable discharges, but right now they need and deserve, along with post 9/11 veterans, better treatment for post-traumatic stress. So your assessment on how we're doing in that area, please.
Well, I think it's an ongoing process, number one, and I can't, I've always maintained that no member who has stepped on the battlefield or been in service leaves untouched, and those affect very deeply not only their personal feelings but families, and the continued research is necessary and continued treatment, and we feel that every avenue of research and every avenue of possible treatment must continue to be pursued to see if we can bring, some closure and some help to many of them that are still suffering. Mr. Wallace, do you have anything to add?
There's a shortage of mental health clinicians around the country. Our survey of women veterans told us they don't have women clinicians that understand their problems. So there's a shortage there. Veterans who got discharged because of something that occurred to them while they were in service deserve to get taken care of. The Veterans Court is a great way now to keep them from going that way, but those that have in the past, we've got to look at those discharges. We've got to see if that's what could have triggered their problems. We've got to address it and get them the care they deserve, because they actually served very honorably, and many of them occurred was they got PTSD or they had a traumatic brain injury that nobody talked about years ago, and they came out to society and caused problems. We owe them to take care of them.
It was not only untreated, it was undiagnosed.
Right.
People called it shell shock or battle fatigue, and they were in effect punished for wounds that they suffered in combat, punished with a less than honorable discharge, and then again by the denial of treatment through the VA that they needed for that wound. So thank you for these comments, and I want to thank you, Commander, in my closing seconds for highlighting the importance of family and caregivers. The omnibus bill that I hope we will pass has a provision led by Senator Murray that provides for better care for our caregivers. I've joined in supporting and advocating for it, but they are often the unsung heroes of our veterans community. The moms and dads, the spouses, and sons and daughters who care for our veterans, they don't get paid for it. And they deserve better support than they receive now. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Ranking Member Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to say that the VA in 2014 saw 56 million patients, an increase of 2 million, and that's 226,000 per day, and they do an excellent job. It's a very small percentage of the people that's seen in VA that are having problems with VA. And I want people to go back to know that once they're in the system, VA do a good job. And I think we need to let everybody know that and not think that there is a major flaw with VA. It is not. Let me say that Commander Putnam is there on your left. She's from Florida. And we had why don't you stand? They said that you had on an off-white. It looks yellow to me, but maybe I can't see. But she's from Florida. And we had a very good meeting yesterday about women veterans. And of course, I'm very concerned about women veterans that are homeless with families. And I would like your recommendations. I know that HUD is working with VA, but the program they have, and I'm happy that HUD has come forward, it doesn't quite fit. So what are you all's recommendations about how we can work to address that particular issue?
Well, that program clearly needs an adjustment and an outreach. Veterans that find themselves in that particular situation feel very helpless, and especially when they have the burden of children and other issues. And we must be more aggressive in an outreach program to assist them and help them find housing and employment, and to recover and become, again, productive members of society. Mr. Wallace, you want to add anything?
I think childcare is the biggest issue, not only in housing them, but also on letting them go to their medical appointments. And then how do you get somebody out of homelessness? You got to train them. If they have children, there's no childcare, they're just spinning around. So childcare, I think, is one of the most critical elements and pieces that's missing in addressing not only women veterans with children, but male veterans with children of single parents.
On the area of suicide, what can we do together to address this issue, making sure that those, and a lot of people think it is the younger veterans, but the major portion of those that's committing suicide is the older veterans, the Vietnam veterans and older. How can we get them involved in the system? As I said earlier, out of the 22 per day, only 3. That means 19 are not involved in the VA system.
That's true. Getting them engaged and part of the system is certainly the biggest challenge. And finding them, you know, they feel hopeless, they feel they have no place to go. And we really have to be more aggressive in not only the training and the transition that is given in the military, but also to our healthcare providers to recognize those symbols. Also, the fact that we did have 800 numbers that were supposedly working and found out that they didn't work at all, and they put them on hold, and that system now is I believe, being checked and adjudicated to get back to its proper procedure. But it is a large problem, and we can't deny the losses that we're incurring every day. Mr. Kelly, do you have anything you want to add to that?
Peer support is key. We're finding that if veterans can talk with other veterans who have the shared experience, that their recovery is much better. And if you can catch them early, and suicide is the last result of a bunch of symptoms that have happened along the way. And if we can catch them early in symptomology, if it's depression or using illicit drugs or alcohol to help self-medicate, if we can reach them then, put them into peer support and put them into any other type of support that they need would be key. And as Mr. Wallace said earlier, hiring more mental health care professionals so that when they do come to VA, that they do have access. One way we can do that is waiving Medicare's GME requirement right now. There's a cap. If we remove that cap for mental health care professionals, we'll be able to train more veterans or more mental health care professionals within VA.
All right, well, thank you very much. Thank you, and you're back.
Senator Rounds.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Commander, I come from South Dakota. It's 200 miles north and south, 400 miles east and west. I think we've got a number of members of our delegation. With the members of the South Dakota delegation, please stand and be recognized. Where you at? Way in the back. Thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you. Commander, rural areas, we struggle with getting healthcare professionals appropriately distributed throughout the entire state. We've got veterans in a lot of our rural areas as well. A number of our Native American reservations are very rural. So simply getting someplace where you can find appropriate health care to begin with is a challenge to begin with. And I noticed in your opening statements, you indicated that you really were concerned that we not privatize the VA. And yet, I don't think by suggesting that we not privatize the VA that you were indicating an unwillingness to have non-VA services being provided. And I'm going to give an example. I've got a veteran who's 83 years old, lives in Pierre, South Dakota, the capital. It's 170 miles to one of the facilities that he would be going to. He wanted to get a set of eyeglasses. He broke his glasses. Went to his local optometrist in Pierre, got it done, got the prescription, turned it into the VA. All he wanted to do was to get glasses. They indicated, sorry, the optometrist is not a VA optometrist. He'll have to come 170 miles out here, have the VA check his eyes out, and then we can get him a set of glasses. I don't want an 83-year-old veteran that broke his glasses on the road, quite frankly. And neither did he. But it took us 6 months to get it resolved. And what in fact, my chief actually offered to drive to Sturgis to pick up the glasses, and they didn't want to do that either. What I'm suggesting is just to be very clear and so that everybody understands, I don't think the VFW is suggesting that using local facilities, and particularly in rural areas, is the same as privatizing the VA. Could you comment on that a little bit? I think our thought process, and there's a lot closer than it might appear.
Well, staffing issues are concerned, and accessibility for care is concerned. And we're certainly not completely against that. In fact, Mr. Wallace has just written a position paper about that. Mr. Wallace?
Senator, there are a number of people that say we should just privatize the VA and give vouchers out to veterans, let them go where they want to go. That's not quality care, because you got to manage what the hell's going on with somebody's life, especially of the specialties that the VA provides. But we realize that VA can't provide everything, and they should give it to the veteran when the doctor, the clinician and the veteran determine they need the care and the closest available place to get the care. We have no problem with that. The VA must be the guarantor of that care, and the VA must get those documents back because it could affect the veteran's service-connected disability, or the veteran could be entitled to a disability. But we're not saying that we should not use VA. We should leverage what VA has and what the community has and get both the best worlds for the veteran so that they get the health care they need in a timely manner.
What I hear is we ought to be focusing on the veteran, and that's where it ought to go.
And you have unique challenges in
Yes.
your area, as you mentioned, but the mileage, I mean, it makes no sense to send somebody 200 miles because it says VA on a structure when you can send them down the street and the VA has a contract with them, guarantees it, and they get quality care because the VA is the guarantor in managing it.
That's, while at the same time allowing for areas of excellence when it comes to those service-related injuries that we really do need special expertise to be provided specifically by the VA, by providers who understand and see on a regular basis some of those challenging service-related injuries and illnesses. Let me just touch one item just in the minute I've got left. In your testimony, Commander, you recommended Congress support VA's budget request for $421 million to establish and implement various IT programs and initiatives to improve veteran access and community care. While smartphone, laptop, and internet technology improvements all have their purpose, time and time again I hear from older veterans who want to talk to a live person, a real person, and want to know their appointments have been made or their issue has been heard and fixed. What do you hear from your older, non-tech savvy generation of veterans regarding these new proposals?
Well, scheduling for VA care is always the issue. And certainly we want them to have timely and adequate care. And the ability to talk to someone for older veterans is part and parcel to what the VA needs to address. And also the fact that they do follow-ups for their appointments to check and see how well they did. And scheduling those appointments and follow-ups are very, very important to the coordination of case care.
Thank you, Commander. Mr. Chairman, thank you.
Thank you, Senator Rounds. Congresswoman Brownlee.
Thank you, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate it. And Commander, thank you for your testimony today, and thank you for your leadership. And I want to thank all of your soldiers across the country who exhibit great leadership on behalf of our men and women who have served in uniform and making sure that they receive the services that they have earned and deserve. So I really do thank you for that. I'm from California, and I wanted to recognize any members here that are from California and to thank you as well. Any members from California? There must be. Thank you. There you go. There you go. Thank you. And I hope my own VFW post commander from Ventura County in California is here, Corey McKinney. So welcome, Mr. McKinney. Very good, very good. So I wanted to talk a little bit about, I agree with Mr. Kelly's comments about the VA has to have an integrated system, both with VA care and community partners integrated, really integrated together. And, but I am very, very concerned about the Congressional Budget Office having changed its policies for scoring bills to authorize new VA medical facilities. And this new policy, I think, is making it very difficult for Congress to authorize high-priority projects across the country in the timely manner that we need. And I have a bill, it's a very simple bill, to approve new leases via resolution instead of by legislation. And this could really speed up the process. And I was just wondering if you agree with me on the issue and the barrier that this exists, and can you comment on the delay in authorizing new construction leases is having on veterans across our country?
Mr. Kelly.
Yes, we completely agree. The leases need to be signed. We spent 2.5 years trying to authorize the build of 27, or authorize 27 leases. We're in the process now. We have 6 or 7 that need to be authorized this year, but there's still like 13 from last year that haven't been authorized. I think your bill does some good things because it'll align the two together, the appropriations process. I still have concerns maybe that the authorization process still has to happen, and the accounting for all that money up front is really what the hurdle is. And we need to figure out how we can circumvent CBO's desire for us. The money's there, and it's money's there over a 20-year period. Why they need to insist that all of that is show in the first year, we either need to write the contract differently so there's an exit clause, or make these service leases again.
Well, let's figure it out together.
Absolutely.
All right, very good. And Commander, too, again, thank you, as many of my colleagues here have already said, for your leadership on so many issues, but particularly for our women veterans. And as been stated, it's the fastest growing group of veterans. And in reading your testimony, I was struck by a notation that you made that unlike women with employer-based and private health insurance, women veterans are charged co-payments for their own preventive health. And have you heard from a lot of women veterans on this issue? And if you could comment on the preventive health, I would imagine birth control is one of those issues. If you could comment on that, I'd really appreciate it.
As a matter of fact, we have, and it is a constant problem in certain facilities, yet in others it's being addressed. Even our active duty military females have had situational problems with their care. As we traveled overseas, they expressed to me their individual inabilities to get some of the things that they certainly need for themselves. And that needs to be taken, whether it's the Department of Defense and the Veterans Administration, while you're on active duty and after. It needs to be looked at, and it needs to be addressed, and it needs to be expanded. And if it needs a little codification through your graces, I think it should be done. And the sooner, the better.
Well, I wholeheartedly agree. I think if women, civilian women, are receiving preventive care and are not having to make co-payments, then certainly our women in the military and our veteran women should not be subject to additional cost for their own preventive health care. So I agree. My time is up. I yield back.
Thank you very much. Mr. Kaufman, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As a 25-year life member of the VFW, it's an honor to be with you today, and I want to thank you. And I want to thank you. We're going to be introducing the Fairness for Veterans Act tomorrow, and you're all supporting that, and I think that that's so important. I think Senator Blumenthal is addressing that on the Senate side, and Senator Waltz wrote the legislation with me on the House side, and I mean, Congressman Waltz and Congressman Rice and Zeldin are also on the bill. But essentially, you know, my late father was a career soldier, and he was an extraordinary infantry soldier. And one Silver Star, 4 Bronze Stars, all combat related, and then Purple Heart for wounds in combat. He wasn't such a good peacetime soldier. And I think because he had such an extraordinary combat record that the Army looked the other way. But what I find today is that we have young men and women who do extraordinary jobs in a combat zone, and then come home. And I think, you know, and I think that there is a connection with post-traumatic stress, but they have, it's a challenge for them to adapt to the kind of garrison peacetime military coming out of a combat zone. And I get that. But what the military is doing today that is different than the past, with what I consider minor infractions that would have never warranted a discharge in previous generations, are just handing out these other than honorable discharges with no access to VA services when somebody gets a bad paper discharge. And so I want to thank you all for working with us in terms of trying to reform this to where when there is a combat veteran who has somewhere in his record book can demonstrate post-traumatic stress, that be a presumption on the appeal review process, whereby the burden is shifted from the veteran to that appeal board. And I think that's so critical that we have, that these Marines, sailors, airmen, soldiers have the ability to upgrade their discharges. These combat veterans, when there clearly is a pattern of post-traumatic stress. And I want to thank you for your support in getting that done. That's absolutely so critical. Thank you.
Thank you.
The second bill that I'm going to be introducing that has bipartisan support as well is that for those military personnel that have come back home, have post-traumatic stress, even if they don't get their discharges upgraded, they ought to have access to mental health services through the VA. I think it's incredible. As a combat veteran, first Gulf War, Iraq War, you know, I know what that stress is like when you come back home. And I think it's extraordinary that for whatever, irrespective of what they've done, and let me tell you, I've seen folks, I've reviewed, particularly soldiers, you know, from Fort Carson, Colorado, that have been discharged, that would have warranted an Article 15 when I was in the United States Army, that are being discharged today. Extraordinary. They ought, right now, they're receiving other than honorable discharges as well. Again, no access to mental health care. We need to open that up to them to get them that kind of care. So I just want to thank you for all you do in support of our veterans, and I'm just so proud to be a member of your organization. Thank you. I yield back.
Senator from Hawaii, Ms. Rano.
Thank you very much, Chairman Miller. It's great to see all of you again. I did serve with you, and we had a wonderful relationship, right? Okay, so you know we're all working together. I would like to acknowledge the presence of VFW members from Hawaii who probably have traveled the farthest, so I'd like to acknowledge the presence of Randy Grant, who is the VFW Department of Hawaii Commander, Viola Indy, Joseph Bragg, Norbert Enos, Nick Young, and Lane Martin. They're back there. Let's give them a hand. Commander, I'd like to thank you for the completeness of your testimony, and I particularly appreciated your suggestion to all of us that we eliminate sequestration altogether, because that is a continuing cloud on all of these programs. Mahalo. And of course, I also echo the sentiments of the members who are here to thank you for your focus on homelessness and among the veterans population, focus on women's health and other issues. I'd also like to thank you for VFW passing a resolution last year at your national convention in strong support of awarding the Congressional Gold Medal to the Filipino veterans of World War II. Thank you very much, because as you noted in your resolution, the Filipino veterans of World War II were an integral part of the U.S. Armed Services Far East, where over 300,000 Filipino veterans of World War II fought. And with just a few thousand of these veterans across the country left, most of whom are in their 90s, I would like to ask my colleagues right now to co-sponsor the Senate and the House resolutions that would award the Congressional Gold Medal to them. And your leadership and your support is very important. I'd also like to thank you as we talk about access to health care. I think it's really important that we acknowledge our veterans who live in the rural areas particularly have concerns and challenges in accessing appropriate care providers. And so I know that the VFW has also taken a position in support of the Veterans E-Health and Telemedicine Support Act, the VETS Act, that I co-sponsored in the Senate with Senator Joni Ernst, and we had a hearing on the Senate Veterans Committee on that. And this would enable veterans, particularly those who live in rural areas, to access healthcare providers outside of their state via telemedicine. Thank you for that. I wanted to turn to claims processing. You know, the VA is a vast system, and anything that we can do to enable those processes, whether it be claims processing or what have you, to be shortened while at the same time meeting the needs of the veterans, I think are things that we ought to support. So I did introduce legislation that would provide the VA with the authority to automate the claims process for a number of survivors' benefits without a formal application from the survivor. And as you all know, that takes a lot of bringing together of lots of materials. And if we can enable the VA to award survivors' benefits without the applicants going through that huge process, I think that would be a good thing. Could you comment on how increasing the automation in the claims process would improve VA's ability to process claims in a more timely manner?
What do you think, Mr. Menard?
Thank you. This is an important area for all of us. Any way that VA can work more efficiently is going to help all veterans and their survivors. VA has proposed changing the process so that in the case of a veteran who is 100% service-connected, who dies, that their surviving spouse would not have to file an application. They'd be automatically recognized. I'm not sure at what point in implementation this is, but they are looking at several other things. The burial claim reimbursement. They've looked at that, and they've proposed that they be allowed to simply award the statutory maximum amount of money available for non-service connected deaths and for service connected deaths without having to require the receipt of receipts and other things to verify that the money was already spent. We know that funerals run, even the cheapest of funerals run thousands and thousands of dollars, and even the average is probably $8,000 or $10,000 or more. So to require the survivors of veterans and to compile receipts and then file that paperwork with the VA for a few $100s or a couple $1,000s in a service-connected death is really a waste of everybody's time and energy.
I certainly look to your organization to identify other areas where we can really speed up the process on behalf of veterans. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Dr. Winstrup, you're recognized.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to thank you all for being here, and I think that you've addressed so many of the issues facing us today very well. I do want to mention that I am a lifetime member of the VFW, and I joined about one day after I returned from Iraq, so I'm proud to be here. I want to do a quick shout out to those from Ohio that are here today. If you'd stand and be recognized, I appreciate it. Thank you very much. I also want to take a moment to recognize the student veterans of America that are here with us today on the behest of the VFW, so they can learn the process and be part of the future generation of the VFW. If you'd stand and be recognized. Thank you. You know, so as a doctor, I can tell you that most of the doctors in the United States at some time train in a VA. They spend some time in a VA, and that's just another tribute to our veterans who not only service in uniform and on the battlefield, but then come home and they help train the future doctors of America. And so for that, I thank each and every one of you. But I want to talk a little bit about one of the things that was mentioned, and speaking as a physician now, I do think it's important, and you mentioned this, that we have a relationship with a primary care doctor in the VA. And so when we talk about that situation, I want the primary care doctor to be the one to say, this is the doctor you need to go see for something in a specialty. And whether that's within the walls of the VA or outside the walls of the VA, that's a decision that should be made between the doctor and the patient, and the doctor weighing in with the patient on the best decision on behalf of the patient. So when we get to that, obviously we're talking about choice here. And I would contend that we not call them non-VA doctors, but because I would contend that they are VA doctors, they're just not within the walls of the VA. As a doctor in our group, I can tell you I'm not the only veteran doctor in our group, and we actually have one of our doctors, his son went to West Point in Operation Enduring Freedom. So we're very VA-centric and veteran-centric, and we'd be proud to put the VA logo up on our practice and say that we provide care to our veterans. And I think that's the way we should approach it, that we are within the VA system. We're just not within those walls. And I think that will make more sense. You know, we talk about cost of care, and it's been in my crawl space since I got here that the VA can't tell us what they're spending per patient. And recently, an independent study was done that we became aware of, that when you add in physical plant, administration, insurance costs, the employees, the healthcare providers, that for a primary care doc, they're spending about $400 per patient visit. That's ridiculous. Medicare pays about $85 for that, and that doctor pays all of their own expenses. We've got to be able to look at those types of things to make sure that we are being productive and that we are able to see more patients, because that's a huge savings, and you can certainly help a lot more veterans if you look at that. One of the big problems we know that our veterans are facing, first of all, when you're sick, you have anxiety. And when you start getting bills that say you're not paying your bills when somebody else should be paying it, it doesn't make it any easier to treat that patient, I can promise you that. And that is something that we need to address. And I hope that you would be supportive where I'm coming from, that the VA doesn't have to be the claims processors. The doctors out there that are doing this are overburdened. They're overburdened because they have to send the entire medical record to get payment, and that doesn't happen when you're filing a claim anywhere else. I agree that the system needs to be integrated, and so that medical record is part of the VA medical record, but when you're talking about a claim, all of that information doesn't need to be there, and someone outside the VA who's very good at processing claims could be doing that for the VA, and I think we would solve that problem. And I hope that I have your support on that, and I'd love for you to weigh in on that, I think in particular Mr. Kelly.
Absolutely agree. What you just described as integration is what VFW envisions for integration. And today, a week ago, VA records, as you said, every documentation, if you went to physical therapy, and 4 times a week you went to physical therapy, that doctor had to submit every time you went to physical therapy for a month to be able to get that payment. That's a burden. But we absolutely need to make sure that at the end of that treatment, that doctor says, you know what, Ray Kelly's physical therapy went well, and I'm going to release him from physical therapy. Or send back saying, you know what, he needs another month of physical therapy. There can't be that blank space where VA doesn't know that more services are provided. So we wholeheartedly agree and look forward to working with you on it.
Thank you, and I yield back.
Mr. O'Rourke.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Commander, thank you for your service, for your testimony today, your advocacy, and all of your efforts that have made me, for one, and I think my colleagues would agree, much better representatives and much better servants to the veterans in our communities. And in the little over 3 years that I've been here, people like Mr. Kelly, Mr. Wallace, who testified before our committee, the commanders of the different posts in El Paso, the members who live in the community that I represent, have helped me so much to better understand how I can do a better job here. So I want to thank you and the organization for your extraordinary efforts, and I want to thank all the fellow Texans in the room for being here. If you would just rattle your spurs for me, and failing that, if you'd stand up, any Texans in the room. Thank you for your service. Thank you for being here. I want to thank all of my colleagues and especially my ranking member, Ms. Brown, for calling attention to issues surrounding access to mental health and preventing veteran suicide. I was struck recently when the Secretary presented his 12-point turnaround plan that included reducing wait times for service-connected disability claims and appeals, greater access to health care in general, reducing veterans' homelessness. But not one of those 12 points was reducing veteran suicide. Now, I know he wants to do that, and I know that he recently convened a national conference to address the issue. But if this is truly a crisis, and if we are going to meet it with urgency, then I think we need to prioritize it accordingly. I want to thank Mr. Kelly again for his help in addressing our issues in El Paso, where we have had some of the, and at times, the worst wait times to access mental health care. And I absolutely know for certain that care delayed becomes care denied and results in veteran suicides. It's that easy a connection to make. And conversely, if we can improve access to mental health care, we can prevent more veteran suicides. The proposal that Mr. Kelly was helpful enough to provide feedback on from the community of El Paso was to, in fact, prioritize this as the most urgent issue that we face in our community. And in doing so, ensure that the VA has the resources necessary to meet every single veteran's needs, the demands in the veteran population, to see a mental health care provider when they need it, to ensure that the regimen of care is followed, and to get better outcomes. That will necessarily mean, in my thinking, that those issues that are not uniquely connected to combat and service that can be seen by civilian doctors should be seen by civilian doctors so that we can develop excellence within the VA. You mentioned the need to share patient medical information effectively when working with community doctors. I agree with you, and that's part of the El Paso plan. I would like to hear from you, Commander, and Mr. Kelly, if time permits, how we can do a better job of increasing the urgency around preventing veteran suicide, and then actually having success, so that instead of consistently talking about 22 a day, we are soon talking about a number that is commensurate with the civilian population, and then as low as we can possibly go, as close to zero as we can get. And so with that, would love to have your thoughts on the issue.
Kelly?
Thank you, and thank you for your work that you've done in El Paso. What you described is what I describe as demand capacity. You went and looked to see what veterans were there, what their needs were, what VA could provide today, what the community could provide today, and found the gaps, and working to fill those gaps. And those gaps are mental health care. So thank you for your work on that. We look forward to working with you in the future on that. On the mental health care, reducing suicide, they're connected. They're together. It is getting people involved. I need to ask other veterans, are you okay today, right? We need to take it upon ourselves to be involved in other people's lives. We need to get them into peer support. We need to be a friend to them. We need to make sure that if they need to get to VA, that we get them to VA. And as I mentioned earlier, eliminating the cap of the graduate medical education, the GME, so we can train and hire more mental health care providers within VA would help reduce your shortage on mental health care providers in your district.
I appreciate that, and I think that is the best long-term solution. I want to continue to work with you, though, on the short and medium term, because I think this is a crisis that we can meet, but it's going to take making it the priority to do so. And with that, I will yield back to the chairman. Thank you.
Senator Tillis. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you all for being here. You're a sight for sore eyes. I'd like to see if there's anybody from North Carolina in the room. If there is, if you'll please stand. I'm also kind of curious if those of you who are in the room, if any of you in your active duty service, if you ever spent any time in North Carolina, just raise your hand. There you go. That's what I'm talking about. I want to thank you all for being here, Commander. I want to thank you. And Mr. Wallace, I don't know that we could actually legitimately have a quorum in a VA committee meeting without you being there, so thank you for your continued persistence. Commander, I want to start with you. I think you touched, one of the first things you touched on in your opening comments were privatizing the VA, and that's not appropriate. I completely agree. In fact, I think anyone in Congress who thinks that that's a viable strategy needs to spend more time in VA centers. Go to the healthcare clinics, go to the hospitals, see the therapeutic nature of just veterans being surrounded by veterans and being served. Half the people who are providers in the VA clinics are themselves veterans. So I think that the discussion needs to be around more what Senator Rounds talked about. How do we fill the gap when we're in a jurisdiction where you're simply not going to have a brick and mortar VA facility? How do you find opportunities to bring veterans together and then build on that through the non-VA care and the choice care? I think that that's the appropriate way to do it. And we have to recognize that that's going to differ from state to state. North Carolina, we've got about 1 million veterans. We've got several urban centers that provides us with kind of critical mass that we're not going to find elsewhere. But I do believe that I, for one, would never support any notion that it would be privatized, because it simply doesn't make sense. It won't produce the quality care that the veterans deserve. Now, I will have to tell you, we've got a lot of dysfunctions in the VA, and I share this story because it really speaks to the dysfunction and the sort of presumption on the part of some about whose problem it is when the VA doesn't get something right. I had this story, actually. We had to work on a constituent request where the wife and the husband came back from being away for a couple of days. The wife's checking the mail. She opens up an envelope, and she told or said to her husband, "Honey, I didn't know you were dead." The VA had made a clerical error and had flagged a record where this man was dead. Now, you'd think this should be pretty easy. You take your DD-214s, you take a valid ID, you go down to a VA office, it's all cleared up. No. They were handed a wad of paperwork saying, you've got to complete all this paperwork to fix our problem. Those are the sorts of things in terms of the customer orientation that we need to work on. Now, I will say that I think that Secretary McDonald is the right guy for the job. I've worked with Senator Tester on in the Senate committee on his 12 breakthrough priorities, and Congressman O'Rourke, it may not be as explicitly stated as it should be, but I do believe suicide prevention is one of it's embedded in some of the work that we're trying to do with the 12 breakthrough priorities. But one of the things that Secretary McDonald has communicated are some of the legislative actions that we'll need to do to enable them to achieve those priorities. You spoke on a couple of legislative positions. I want to get to the appeals process if time allows, but are you all in sync with what the department have requested? We'll get to the appeals question in terms of legislative initiatives that we need. It's our work we've got to do in order for the VA to make progress.
Yes.
Good, good. So those are ones that we should just be expecting Congress to act on and move forward. They're not particularly contentious.
Absolutely.
Good. I think that's very important. It's our job. I mean, we've got these 12 breakthrough priorities. If we all believe they're a priority, then we need to get the job done. There's legislative action that we need to take. And I'm glad to hear that you all are behind it. In my remaining time on the appeals process, this is something that I would like to maybe have, I'm going to meet with the North Carolina delegation later today, but I'd really like to work on how do we solve the root cause of the problem? Because if it is true that 2% of the veterans are responsible for 45% of the appeals, and let's figure out why. That may not be a bad thing. It may be perfectly legitimate, but how do we get to a point where we have a fully developed appeal, but make sure that we're not putting another veteran in a situation where they're being unfairly treated? I think we want to make sure that we make progress there, and would appreciate in my remaining time any comments you may have, but we want to continue to work on this. I think it's a very important thing and a very important factor in drawing down the backlog.
Well, why don't you talk about that?
We agree 100% that we've got to get it down. But the only legislative proposal that we, in the 12 priorities from the Secretary that we don't agree with is the appeals process.
That's why
that has to take time to work through so that we all understand what's going on and how it affects the rights of veterans.
Well, I'd like for us, if we may, just really get to a point where we can start talking about how do we really, it's the problem. We may have a difference of opinion right now amongst stakeholders in terms of the approach, but drawing down that backlog is critically important, and figuring out how to do it, but do it in a fair way, is something that I'd love to work with you all on. I appreciate your continued advocacy. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much. Senator Cassidy, you're recognized.
Gentlemen. First, shout out to the people from Louisiana. A good Louisiana name, Snake Dugas. I don't know if Snake is here. Yeah. And the other people from Louisiana, Ray, Cerelia, the rest, Brian, thank you all very much. I'm also a physician, and recently I went down to LSU Medical School. They're doing incredible work on neurosciences and how we could pharmacologically, not like make somebody feel better, but actually reverse traumatic brain injury. Whoa, wouldn't that be incredible? What I don't know, and I'm asking, I don't know this, and if the answer is no, encourage. The future of medical research is registries. I don't know if y'all have a registry in which somebody with TBI could put himself or herself there. So if there's a clinical trial that arises, boom, you've enrolled. You've got folks, mix and match. You want people of a certain age, you want people of a certain gender, certain geographic location. Do y'all have such a registry? And if not, would it be a challenge to put one together?
Senator, we're in the process of working with former Vice Chief of the Army, General Peter Corelli, who runs One Mind, and they have a website for TBI individuals who have TBI, also for caregivers. They can access that website and get best practices and talk about the issues and say, is this right, is that right, do you have the same symptoms? So we're in the process, the early stages of working with them and tying into that website that they have.
Then just to encourage, because that sounds, I'm guessing that is an informational website where you can download information, et cetera, but you could get on anonymously. If there's a way to protect identity, which I'm sure there, you'd like to think there is, that someone, again, just create a registry, because that is the future. And what y'all are is an incredible network. And so if somebody at LSU or elsewhere wants to do such a study, again, you could populate that study so quickly, but you could also inform others going on what their experience was. It would be an incredible tool, so just to say that. I also want to give a shout out to my folks from Louisiana, but also elsewhere. Y'all are an incredible resource. I was told that veterans homelessness was under control back home, and then I was informed, no, we meet twice a year and give out coats and things for the weather, and there's a lot of folks. So that said, I hear from you and receive information that I don't necessarily receive from VA administrators, as you might guess. And that results from meeting with you, that's number one, but do you have a formal process? For example, I know that some VAs have a very good system for mental health, that if somebody misses their appointment, they actually have slots open later in the day so that they can stay a little later and still be seen. That's a best practices. I also understand, because I'm a physician, I speak to my physician colleagues, that others have not instituted such a system. If you miss your appointment, you're scheduled 2 weeks later. And you miss that one, you're scheduled 2 weeks later. And they call it a rain day, so I'm told, because no one shows up. Do you all have a formal process of comparing institutions to each other as to who has implemented best practices and who has not? I say that, if not, to encourage, because you are such a wealth of information. That would be an incredible tool for us to be able to compare. Again, a question and then a request, kind of all embedded into one.
What would you think? Yes, surveys are surveys.
So each one of our departments has a homeless chairman, and we use them as a resource to make sure that we know what's going on in the state. And as a matter of fact, through our survey, with the women's survey, I don't remember the number off the top of my head, but there were women who were either homeless, sleeping on somebody else's couch, or on the verge of homelessness, and we were able to connect them. We're doing follow-up to make sure that they are getting into some sort of permanent housing today.
Okay. Well then, thank y'all for your service. Again, if y'all could come up with a system that would help us by comparing best practices between different hospitals and different regions, that would be a way to we could tap in, holding the VA accountable. They're good people, but still, a little accountability never hurts. Checking my daughter's credit card bill once a month reveals surprises sometimes. That would be a way that you could bring your assets even to greater force in order to help us do things better. Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Senator Sullivan, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I just want to thank everybody for being here. When I think about what the VFW does for this country, it's really it's double service, at least double service. So all of you have served our nation, and then you take the time to then do what you're doing now. You advocate for our veterans. So I can't think of another group that does that kind of double service. So I think all of you just deserve a round of applause for what you do. So I'm going to start that right now. I want to follow my friend Senator Tillis's lead, asking, we don't have as big a population as North Carolina and Alaska, but I know there's probably some Alaskan vets out there. Any Alaskan vets you want to stand up and be recognized in the back there? All right. And then how about anyone who's actually served in Alaska? If you just want to raise your hand, I know we have a lot of that. There we go. Thank you. So I like to brag on this committee. We have more vets per capita in Alaska than any state in the country. We might not be as much population, but we sure got a lot of vets. So I love being on this committee. The other thing that's great about this committee, as you probably see, is very bipartisan. And I think there's no more important bipartisan work than to take care of the people who've served our country so well over decades. So I wanted to just start by mentioning a trip I had asked Undersecretary Shulkin before he got confirmed, or after his confirmation, to come on up to Alaska and hear from our veterans. We held a number of town hall meetings that he could just hear from us. One of the things that I think shocked him, it shocked me, and we really need to focus on. It might seem like a minuscule issue, but if any of you are having a problem with it, I certainly want to offer my office's help, the VA's help. What we saw up there, which was remarkable, we heard a number of stories where veterans had gone to the VA, got permission from the VA to have some kind of medical procedure or a surgery, then went to a provider to get that procedure done. Then there was no payment from the VA, and guess who started getting bills and collection agencies calling them? The veteran. It was unbelievable. So I saw this, the Undersecretary of the VA saw this in Alaska. So I just want to mention to all of you, if you have seen this, there's a 1-800 number that the VA has, and I can give it to you right now if you need it. Or
if you're really having problems, even if you're not from Alaska, you call my office, because we have been dogging the VA on this issue. It is outrageous. If you're a veteran and you have a collection agency calling you, which is very stressful, because the VA is not paying the bills that it approved you to go have a medical procedure on. So my office's number in Anchorage, 907-271-5915. If you're having a problem with that, call us. The 800 number is 877-881-7618. And believe me, I've seen so many veterans in Alaska, just Alaska, that have this problem, and it needs to stop. In the last hearing we had, the Secretary, Undersecretary Shulkin said they were going to put an end to it. So hopefully they put an end to it. Let me ask another question. And this is just, I was just home yesterday and met with the legislator, a state legislator, fellow Marine friend of mine, who had put forward a resolution in the Alaska State Legislature to look at trying to change the name of PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, to post-traumatic stress injury. And I'm just wondering if any of you heard an idea like this, or if you have any thoughts on it. This is something I told him I'd look at the federal level, but I certainly would want your view. Obviously, disorder carries with it a certain connotation versus an injury, which is what this really is, an injury that you obtained in the service of your nation. Commander, any?
I think we could support that. But, Mr. Menard?
Thank you. This idea comes up from time to time. The name is actually established by the American Psychiatric Association, and it's DSM 4 or 5, whatever the current version is. It's changing it in the VA rating schedule, changing how it appears on the diagnosis the doctors make. It doesn't change what it is. It was, back in the days of World War II and Korea and even Vietnam, a poorly understood problem. It wasn't until the late 70s that the American Psychiatric Association finally recognized it as a discrete problem. And VA began at that point to acknowledge it and grant service connection for it. Changing the name of it is a Band-Aid. It doesn't change what it is or how it should be treated or how approached within the VA. So we don't agree that the name needs to be changed.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Ms. Murray.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Great to be here. Thank you to all of you for being here. Commander, let me start with you. When we send our men and women in uniform to war, we commit to care for them when they come home. And when they are wounded, we have an obligation to provide the best care possible. For several years now, we have been failing our wounded veterans. Thousands of veterans have service-connected injuries that directly prevent them from having children. I've met a number of these couples. They are so frustrated, and I am too, that this ban remains in place for no good reason. I've introduced a bill on IVF that would correct this by removing the arbitrary ban on VA providing the same modern medical care that any civilian can get and that the DO already offers. So I wanted to ask you, do you believe that it's time for Congress to finally do the right thing and end the VA's ban on IVF?
I agree with you wholeheartedly. As you well know, this has been in the news lately. There was a huge report about it. There are supposedly 1,500 young men and women around the country who need that kind of service. And they've been prevented because of the regulation from receiving that same kind of care. We wholeheartedly support making these young men and women whole again when they come home. And if that means in vitro, it should include that.
Commander, thank you. They deserve to have families after their service, and I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Now, on another topic, I continue to hear from veterans and caregivers in my home state of Washington who believe they are being kicked out of the caregivers program unfairly. And this is a complaint that I take very seriously because I believe that our country has a duty to care for veterans and their families who have sacrificed so much on our behalf. For example, one woman said her son's fiancé received a stipend to care for him when they were in Missouri, but when they moved to the Seattle area, they were cut off, and the explanation was, quote, "the decision is regional." Well, we all hope that veterans will eventually graduate off the caregiver program, of course, as their conditions improve, but this graduation has to be a medical decision and must include input from the veteran and the caregiver, because at the end of the day, this country is responsible for providing quality care and support for our veterans, whether it's through a caregivers program or in a traditional VA facility. Anything less is unacceptable. So my question is, have you heard any other similar complaints from your members, and what do you think is the cause?
Jerry.
We have heard several of these stories, and we've approached the VA on it, trying to get a better explanation, and the explanation they provide us is not much different than what's been provided to you. We think it's, what VA needs is consistency around the country. If they're eligible in Louisiana or Missouri or someplace else and they move to Washington or Oregon or Vermont, they should not be afraid of losing their caregiver status.
Thank you. It doesn't matter where you are. The standards should be the same, and it should be a medical decision, and I'm going to continue to follow this closely. And finally, I wanted to ask you, yesterday, the Department of Education's Inspector General released a report on the department's review of student loan services' failure to honor the Protections of Service Members Civil Relief Act. The IG actually found serious flaws with the department's review and called their conclusions unsupported and inaccurate. I believe we need to act to make sure our service members receive the protections they have been promised. Have you heard any concerns from your members about their student loans? Any of you?
Did you hear anything, Ray?
We haven't at this point. It is a concern. That act is something we need to make sure that we have teeth to it. So when these violations do happen, that VA can reach back out and take action against those institutions.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, I urge all of our committee members to look at the IG report from the Department of Education that showed very serious flaws with the Department of Education's review of these student loan servicers and their failure to protect our service members under the law.
Mr. Chairman, I just want to add to Senator Murray's point here. She and I and Senator Warren requested the IG report, and it is really required reading for everybody in this room, because as much as we talk about VA accountability, this is an example of our needing to demand more of the VA when it affects our veterans coming home and needing and deserving educational benefits that they're denied as a result of these abuses.
Yes, sir. Mr. Sullivan has requested one other question. Mr. Sullivan.
Commander, I know that it's in the testimony and it's a focus both with regard to the Choice Act and express appeals. Can you just give the committee some additional thoughts on what the top priorities, when you're looking at improving the Choice Act, when you're looking at improving our appeals process? I have a bill that's the companion to H.R. 800. It's Senate 2473, Senate Bill 2473. But what are your top priorities that we should be looking at when we're looking at trying to improve the Choice Act and focusing on this big issue of appeals? As you know, some of our veterans have had appeals out there that are 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 10 years old.
Well, timely fashion, you named it. You hit the nail on the head. Certainly the quality of care and also the timeliness of the response and the outreach to make sure that that care is up to standards and that the bills are paid and the entire follow-up process is followed. In reference to the appeals process, Mr. Wallace is going to comment on that. Jerry?
The problem with appeals, the debacle in appeals, is of the VA's own making. They have ignored this problem for the last 6 years. Prior to that, even when they worked appeal cases, they consistently understaffed the appeals teams. There was an IG report of a year or so ago that looked at several offices, and I believe it said that although there were 19% of the claims activities in that regional office were appeals, 9% of the resources were assigned to it. VA has mismanaged this and has caused this tsunami of 440,000 appeals. As we began addressing this issue, at least as far back as 2012, when we addressed the House Government Oversight Committee, we've talked about this in 2013 and 2015 in testimony. We provided 7 recommendations in January of last year, some of which the VA could have implemented immediately and made some progress here. Just 2 weeks ago, in a meeting with the Deputy Secretary Sloan Gibson, we made 4 recommendations, all within the realm of VA to execute immediately and have an immediate impact. All it took is the will. And his response was, without saying it in so many words, I don't care. We've set a goal of accomplishing appeals in 1 year, and we're just going to march down that road rather than deal with the current problem. Marching down that road is a rush to deny. It's not to grant benefits. It's not to serve veterans. And we oppose these initiatives that the VA has proposed to Congress.
Do you have you made public those 12 recommendations or the 4 recommendations that you were just talking about, so we can see what those are?
Certainly.
Okay. Well, it'd be good to be able to follow up to make sure we understand exactly what those are.
Certainly.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. The ranking member, Ms. Brown.
I just have a quick question on that same area, because the proposal that came to us, that it was a requirement that the people that work in that particular area, they had mandatory overtime. And they were asking us for additional staff positions so they could take care of those mandatory overtimes and have additional people to work to process those claims.
It's my understanding that just a few weeks ago, the acting Undersecretary for Veterans Benefits reallocated $10 million in overtime money to process appeals. A, it's a drop in the bucket, and B, it does nothing about the 40 hours a week that employees work routinely other work. This is too little, too late, and what they propose is incredibly harmful to veterans. As I said, if implemented, it would be a rush to deny. We estimate that BVA grants, which stand at 29% today, would fall at least 25% if these proposals are adopted.
Well, we would very much would like for you to share your recommendations with us. In addition to that, I guess I'm really concerned that it needs to be, and the veterans need to be able to work together to have a complete package when they come to VA so we can process them quickly. Now, the problem is we have one person that let's say, for 25 years been denied. And I'm wondering, is at some point, is that denied a no? I know that no is never okay if the person is from Florida, but it's okay if he's from some other area. But how can we work together to get some kind of closure on some of these so that we could quickly process them? Maybe some of them, are more complicated, but some of them we can just process them.
First of all, we're not convinced that the VA's assertion that 2% of the appeals that they're processing take up 40% of their resources. What you'll find in some of those cases, all of those cases, that go on for 5 or 6 or 25 years, is that the veteran has received many, many, many decisions, all of which are no. And they have an opportunity through submitting additional evidence and also through remands from the court, from the board, and so on, all of which eat up time. Now, the fact that it took 25 years, I would guarantee you that there was probably no more than 2 or 3 months worth of effort on the part of VA to process that. All the rest of that time, it was waiting for somebody to get to it.
Well, I hope this is the area that we can work together to try to get this resolved
Certainly.
quickly. Thank you.
Mr. Blumenthal, any other questions?
I just want to note for the record that there was standing room only when we began this hearing. There's standing room only now. I want to thank all of you for being here today. Your presence sends a powerful message, and I hope the nation and the Congress are taking note. Thank you all.
Thank you, sir.
Commander, thank you very much for your testimony. Thank you to the staff that provides outstanding information to our committee. We appreciate their presence here on the Hill. We certainly appreciate everybody being here today. I look forward to seeing you this evening, and I would say that all members would have 5 legislative days with which to revise and extend their remarks or add any extraneous material. Without objection, so ordered. With that, this hearing is adjourned.